Why Islam accepted Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi, but the world rejected him. Have you ever wondered why Islam, a faith revealed in Arabia, chose a poor, dark-skinned slave from Africa to be the first man to raise its call across the sky? Why Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi, a man the world rejected, was handpicked by the Prophet himself to be the voice of Islam? Because when the world saw color, Islam saw character. When men saw a slave, Allah saw a believer whose heart was free. In this episode, we're going to uncover the truth behind Bilal's story, a story that still challenges our world today, a story that says, faith, not face, that's what Allah honors. From the sands of Mecca to the heart of Medina, from the pain of chains to the honor of the Adhān, Bilal's journey is not just history. It's a message for every one of us still trapped by pride, racism, and ignorance. So before you scroll away, pause and reflect, because this story will shake your understanding of Islam and remind you what true equality looks like. I'm Mallam JIJI, and this is Wisdom from the Minbar. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every time you do, you help us spread truth, justice, and the beauty of Islam to a world that's forgotten what faith really means. The world that rejected Bilal. Before Islam, the world was a dark place. Not because the sun didn't shine, but because hearts were blinded by arrogance, tribalism, and ignorance. Men were valued not for their character, but for their tribe, wealth, and skin color. In that age, the poor were invisible, the women were voiceless, and the slaves were not even considered human. In the streets of Mecca, merchants traded gold, silk, and slaves, and among them stood a man who seemed to have nothing but chains around his hands. His name was Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi, a man from Abyssinia, what we call Habasha, modern-day Ethiopia. His skin was dark, his status low, and his worth, in the eyes of the arrogant, was less than a camel. But in the eyes of Allah, his heart was more precious than mountains of gold. Bilal's masters treated him as property. He obeyed not out of loyalty, but out of fear. And yet, deep inside, his soul refused to bow to stone idols and lifeless statues. He looked at the Quraysh praying to rocks and knew there had to be more to life than this deception. He was waiting for a message that could set his soul free. Then came Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, with words that would shake the world. Say, there is no God but Allah, and you will succeed. La ilaha illa Allah tuflihu. It was simple, but revolutionary. Those words tore down false gods, tribal pride, and racial supremacy. For the first time in history, a religion declared that no Arab is superior to a non-Arab, and no white to a black, except by taqwa. But before the world could understand that truth, Bilal would have to suffer for it. When Bilal accepted Islam, the news spread quickly through Mecca like fire. His master, Ummah ibn Caliph, was enraged. How dare you, slave of Habasha, he shouted, turn away from the gods of your masters? Bilal did not fight back. He simply said, Ad, 1-1. That single word, Ad, became the loudest declaration of freedom in history. Ummah dragged him to the desert, laid him on the scorching sand, and placed a heavy stone on his chest. He told him to deny Muhammad or die. But Bilal, with lips cracked and skin burning, only whispered louder, Ad. Every time he said it, an angel's wing trembled in the sky. Every time he said it, a slave somewhere found courage. And every time he said it, a tyrant's power weakened. This was the world before Islam, a world that rejected Bilal because of his color and his status. But through the fire of torture, Allah was purifying a soul that would soon become the first voice of Islam. Bilal's suffering was not humiliation, it was preparation. For the man the world called a slave was about to become the caller to prayer for kings and prophets. From the chains of slavery to the heights of faith, Bilal's journey began not in glory, but in pain. And that pain became the proof that when Allah chooses a heart, no world can reject it. Stay with me, brothers and sisters, as we uncover how Islam raised a man the world had thrown away. This is wisdom from the Minbar, and I am Mallam JIJI, reminding you that true honor is only with Allah. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and comment ad below, so that the voice of Bilal may echo once again across the Ummah. The call that freed the slave. The sun blazed over Mecca, merciless and bright, and under its heat lay Bilal ibn Rabah, chained, beaten, and left for dead. But in his heart burned a fire no master could extinguish, the fire of Tawhid, the oneness of Allah. Every lash that struck him was meant to silence him, but instead it awakened something greater, a courage born not from the body, but from faith. When Bilal said, Ad, he was not just speaking. He was defying an empire that built its power on oppression, class, and color. His voice carried more truth than all of Quraysh's idols combined. The tortures continued for days. Children mocked him, men spat on him, women whispered, "That's the mad Habashi slave." But Bilal's eyes never lost their calm. He knew he was not alone. For every stone thrown, an angel recorded. For every insult spoken, Allah drew him closer. And then came Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, R.A. The noble companion could not bear the sight of injustice. He walked to Ummah ibn Caliph and said, "How long will you punish this man for saying my Lord is Allah?" Ummah sneered, "If you feel pity for him, then buy him and take him." Without hesitation, Abu Bakr said, "I buy him for his weight in gold, and by Allah, I free him for the sake of Allah." That day, Bilal's chains were removed, but his voice was unleashed forever. When the Prophet heard the news, his face glowed with joy. He embraced Bilal and said, "Abu Bakr is our master, and he freed our master." That statement alone changed history. In a single sentence, the Prophet shattered 1,400 years of racism, tribal pride, and class division. The slave became Sayyiduna, our master, and the noble Qurayshi became the servant of a freed man in the path of Allah. That is Islam, a faith that doesn't just preach equality, it proves it. Bilal's freedom was not just from chains, it was spiritual liberation. He no longer served man, but the Lord of all mankind. He no longer bowed to idols, but to the one who created the heavens and the earth. And from that day forward, Bilal's every breath was for Allah. When he walked for Islam. When he spoke truth. And when he called to prayer, his voice reached hearts before it reached ears. From the dust of slavery to the freedom of faith, Bilal became a symbol of what Islam truly offers. Dignity through servitude to Allah alone. No master freed Bilal, Tawhid did. No gold purchased his soul, Iman did. This was the moment the world began to understand. The greatest freedom is not to own your body, but to free your soul from false gods. If this story of Bilal moved you, share it now so that others may remember. True liberation begins when you say, Ad, when the lowest became the highest. The days of humiliation were over. The man who once lay on the burning sands of Mecca, bound and bleeding, now stood tall, not in a palace, but in the house of Allah. Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi, the freed slave of Abyssinia, had now become the Muadhin of Islam, the one chosen to call the believers to prayer. When the Prophet first built the masjid in Medina, he looked among his companions, men of wisdom, wealth, and lineage. And yet, he called one name above them all. Where is Bilal? The same Bilal that Quraysh called slave. The same man the world had rejected. The Prophet said to him, "O Bilal, stand and call to prayer." And when Bilal climbed to the rooftop and stretched his voice to the heavens, the first Adhān echoed through Medina. Allāhu Akbar, Allāhu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. His voice shook the air, and angels descended to listen to a sound purer than any music on earth. It was no coincidence that Bilal was chosen. The Prophet wanted to send a message to the world. That honor in Islam is not inherited. It is earned by faith and obedience. In a society that once bowed to bloodlines and tribes, Islam now raised a man who had neither. and placed him in the position of calling all people to the remembrance of Allah. From the lowest, Allah made him the highest. From a man who was once beaten to silence, Allah made him the one whose voice began every prayer. During the conquest of Mecca, when the Prophet entered the city in victory, he ordered Bilal to climb on top of the Kaaba, the same structure once guarded by the Quraysh elite, and call the Adhān. The sight shook the city. The nobles who once mocked him looked up in silence. One of them whispered in anger, "Could Muhammad not find anyone better than this black man to make the call?" When the Prophet heard this, he turned to them and said, "Indeed, Allah does not look at your faces or your wealth, but he looks at your hearts and your deeds." That moment was more than symbolic. It was divine justice. A man who was once property now stood above the lords of Quraysh. He stood not in arrogance, but in obedience, not to humiliate them, but to show them that Islam destroys every chain the world builds. Bilal's voice on the Kaaba was the declaration of a new world order, a world where taqwa, not tribal pride, determined a person's worth. From the slave market to the minaret, from silence to the Adhān, Bilal's story is the living proof that when Allah raises you, no man can hold you down. Brothers and sisters, if Bilal's rise reminds you that faith breaks all limits, then type in the comments, "Allāhu Akbar." Honor belongs to Allah alone. And don't forget to share this reminder, so others may learn that no color, no class, and no name matters before Allah, only taqwa. Bilal and the Prophet, a bond beyond race? The Prophet and Bilal, R.A., shared something deeper than companionship. They shared a bond of faith, brotherhood, and love that broke every social wall. To the world, Bilal had been a slave. To the messenger of Allah, Bilal was family. In the court of the Prophet, there was no seat reserved for lineage or color. What mattered was taqwa, and Bilal was full of it. One day, the Prophet looked at Bilal and said, "O Bilal, tell me what deed you have done, for I heard your footsteps in Jannah ahead of me." Allāhu Akbar. Imagine the Prophet of mercy, the best of all creation, saying that the sound of Bilal's steps was heard in paradise before his own. Bilal, humble and amazed, replied, "O Messenger of Allah, I do not know of any special deed, except that whenever I perform wudu, I pray 2 rak'at for Allah." That was it. No wealth, no status, no power, just sincerity and consistency. And Allah raised him above kings and nobles for it. The Prophet trusted Bilal deeply. Whenever he would rise for battle or journey, he would say, "Bilal, bring me comfort, call the Adhān." Because to the messenger, the Adhān was not just a call to prayer. It was the voice of the beloved friend reminding the Ummah to rise for Allah. Bilal would stand before the Prophet, his voice trembling with love and awe, and proclaim, "Allāhu Akbar, Allāhu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muadhin Rasulullah." And every time, the Prophet would smile, because that voice was not just Bilal's. It was the sound of freedom echoing through the heavens. In one gathering, when Abu Bakr, R.A., was praised for freeing Bilal, the Prophet corrected the crowd and said, "Abu Bakr is our master, and he freed our master." With those words, the messenger destroyed centuries of racial arrogance. He made it clear that the greatest master is the one who frees others for the sake of Allah, and the greatest honor is to be a servant of the most merciful. Bilal's closeness to the Prophet was not based on tribe or blood. It was built on faith, loyalty, and love for Allah. He served the Prophet with devotion, stood beside him in prayer, fought beside him in battle, and wept for him when he returned to Allah. When the Prophet passed away, Bilal could no longer bear to call the Adhān. Every time he reached Ashhadu anna Muadhin Rasulullah, his voice would break, and his tears would drown the sound. Their bond was more than friendship. It was faith in motion. The messenger and Bilal, 2 hearts united not by blood, but by belief in the one Lord of all bloodlines. In a world that separates people by color and tribe, Islam united them by Tawhid. If you believe that true brotherhood knows no color, write in the comments, Faith unites, pride divides. And share this story, so the world may remember the love between the Prophet and Bilal. R.A. A love that proved. In Islam, no race is higher than the heart that submits. The shadow of racism returns. By Mallam JIJI, Wisdom from the Minbar. After the death of the Prophet, the earth fell silent. The companions wept, and Bilal ibn Rabah could no longer raise his voice for the Adhān. Each time he reached the words, Ashhadu anna Muadhin Rasulullah, his heart broke and tears flowed freely. He missed the Prophet not just as a leader, but as a friend, a man who saw him not for his color, but for his heart. Bilal soon left Medina, unable to bear the memories that haunted every call to prayer. He traveled to Syria, where he continued his service to Islam. But as time passed and generations changed, something darker began to creep back into the hearts of men. The same poison that Islam had destroyed: racism, arrogance, and pride. It started quietly, a remark, a laugh, a whisper of superiority. One tribe saying, "We are better." One man claiming, "My bloodline is pure." And slowly, the disease of Jahiliyyah, ignorance, returned. People began to forget the message that Bilal lived and bled for. They forgot the words of the Prophet. There is no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, nor of a white over a black, except by taqwa, piety. Hadith Ahmad al-Bayhaqi. But the world, even the Muslim world, began to slip. Color and class started to matter again. The same hands that once broke idols began to build walls between believers. Bilal's story was not just about freedom. It was a warning that if the Ummah forgets its foundations, it will return to the chains it once escaped. And today, those chains are everywhere. We see them when we judge a brother by his skin, when we mock an accent, when we deny marriage because of tribe, when we think leadership belongs only to one race or culture. That is modern Jahiliyyah, hidden, dressed in culture, but rotten at its core. The shadow of racism has returned, but the message of Bilal still stands tall. That faith is the only measure of a man. He, the slave of Habasha, became the Muadhin of Rasulullah, while men of noble birth now sleep in forgotten graves. Bilal's name is still spoken with honor on every minbar, in every masjid, in every nation. O Ummah of Muhammad, have we forgotten Bilal? Have we allowed the world to blind us again with the colors of ignorance? The story of Bilal is not history. It is a mirror. When you look into it, you see what Islam gave us and what we are slowly throwing away. If your heart refuses to bow to racism, type in the comments, Inna akramakum inda Allāhi akakum. The most honored are the most righteous. And share this message widely, so that the echo of Bilal's voice may remind every Muslim. Color fades, but taqwa never dies. The forgotten hero of Africa. Centuries have passed since Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi walked the sands of Arabia, but his footsteps still whisper a truth the world keeps ignoring. He was not just the first Muadhin. He was the first African leader in Islam, the first man of color to stand above the Quraysh and call the believers to prayer. Yet, today, how many Muslims even know his full story? How many remember his courage, his patience, his unwavering love for the Prophet? The world celebrates kings, athletes, and celebrities. But Bilal, the man who changed history, is often left out of the story. He came from Habasha, modern-day Ethiopia, a land rich in faith, culture, and strength. A land that gave Islam its first refuge when the Prophet sent his companions. To the just king, Najashi, who ruled with justice and compassion. That was Africa, the first continent to protect Islam before Arabia ever conquered it. But today, Africa is often spoken of as a land that received Islam, not as one that protected it, nurtured it, and sacrificed for it. This is the tragedy. We have forgotten that the roots of Islamic equality grew from the soil of Africa. Bilal stood as a symbol of that truth. A black man, once enslaved, now leading the most noble of men in prayer. He broke every chain the world had built, the chain of race, of class, of lineage. And yet, many in the Muslim world today still measure leadership by tribe, complexion, or surname. We build walls where Islam tore them down. Imagine if Bilal were alive today. Would we let him lead our masjids? Would we invite him to our homes? Or would we whisper, "He's not from our people"? These are questions every Muslim must face. Because the forgotten hero of Africa is not just Bilal's story, it's our test. Allah raised Bilal not because of his background, but because of his heart. And Allah will never change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. Quran 13:11. Bilal was Africa's greatest son, not because he was African, but because he carried the light of Islam with dignity. He proved that truth does not need a tribe, and honor does not need a title. So, to every African Muslim, remember your roots in Bilal. Stand tall. Your skin is not your limit. It is your reminder of the diversity that Islam honors. If you believe the world has forgotten Bilal, remind them. Comment below. Bilal's legacy still lives in Africa. And share this message, not for fame, but to restore the memory of a man who showed that faith, not color, defines greatness. When you look at the life of Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi, you are not just reading about a companion. You're reading about the blueprint of equality in Islam. A man once chained to the ground by the cruelty of men, whom Allah raised to the heavens by the beauty of his faith. But the question remains, have we truly learned from his story, or have we buried it? Today, our Ummah stands divided. By color, by class, by tribe, by nationality. In some places, Muslims are ashamed of their African roots. In others, they look down on fellow believers because of language or lineage. We wear the label Ummah, but our hearts are still stained by the divisions of Jahiliyyah. And yet, Islam taught us something different. The Prophet said, "All of you are from Adam, and Adam was from dust." Hadith Tirmidhi. That means the color of your skin, the name of your tribe, the size of your bank account. None of it makes you closer to Allah. Only taqwa, righteousness, lifts one's soul above another. Bilal's story is not a story of slavery. It is a story of liberation from ignorance. He showed that a believer with a pure heart is greater than a king with a corrupted soul. And this is the lesson we must relearn today. Islam came to unite, not divide. To lift the lowly, not honor the proud. To judge by hearts, not by heritage. Lesson 1. Purify your heart before you preach equality. You cannot call others to justice while holding prejudice in your heart. When you see a believer of another race or tribe, remember Bilal and say, "This man could be closer to Allah than I will ever be." Lesson 2. Rebuild the Ummah with true brotherhood. We need mosques where every Muslim feels welcome. Rich or poor, black or white, Arab or non-Arab. We need leaders who follow the character of Bilal, humble, patient, and sincere. Lesson 3. Reclaim Islam's African legacy. Africa was not just a follower of Islam. It was a pillar. It sheltered the early Muslims, produced scholars, warriors, and poets. To deny that history is to deny part of Islam itself. O believers, every time you hear the Adhān, remember that it was a black man who first called it out over the sands of Medina. Every time you say Allāhu Akbar, remember that Bilal's voice echoed those same words in the presence of Rasulullah. He may have been forgotten by the world, but never by Allah. And if we honor his legacy, then perhaps Allah will honor us again, as one Ummah, united in taqwa, not divided by ignorance. If you believe Bilal's story deserves to be told again and again, type in the comments. Islam destroyed racism. Bilal proved it. Share this documentary far and wide, so that Muslims and non-Muslims alike may know that the truest color of Islam is the light of faith, not the shade of one's skin. This is Mallam JIJI from Wisdom from the Minbar. If this message touched your heart, click like, share, and subscribe to keep this dawah alive. Together, we remind the world, Islam is not just a religion. It is a light that sees no color. Why Islam accepted Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi, but the world rejected him. And so, my brothers and sisters, the story of Bilal ibn Rabah al Habashi is not a tale of the past. It's a mirror to our present. He stood as proof that Islam never bowed to race, and that the truest nobility comes only from taqwa, from the purity of the heart, not the pigment of the skin. The world rejected Bilal because he was black, but Islam accepted him because he was true. And today, the Ummah must decide, do we still follow the sunnah of the Prophet, or the sickness of our own prejudice? O believers, every time you hear the Adhān, remember the one who first raised his voice for it, the African man whose faith shook the mountains of arrogance. And ask yourself, have we honored his legacy, or buried it beneath our silence? If this message touched your soul, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it, let others hear it, so that Bilal's echo continues to travel across the world. Comment below and write, Islam sees hearts, not colors. And if you haven't already, subscribe now to Wisdom from the Minbar, where stories like this remind the Ummah that Islam's beauty is for every race, every people, and every heart that says La ilaha illa Allah. I'm Mallam JIJI, and this is Wisdom from the Minbar. Until next time, may your heart stay pure, your faith stay strong, and your voice always rise like Bilal's. For the sake of Allah alone.